www.ecr.gov/budget. I'm Bonnie Woodrum, Community Affairs Supervisor for the Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District. Today, we invite you to learn more about EVMWD's budget as staff shares with the board and staff shares the proposed budget for the 2022 and 2023 fiscal years. This is an informational meeting for the community and not an agendized meeting. In this 4-session series, we will cover everything from water and wastewater service, water supplies, compliance, staffing, maintenance, and development. Tonight, we will focus on staffing and imported water. We welcome your questions this evening. You will notice a chat button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can submit questions here as you think of them, or you may email them to me directly at bwoodrome, WOODROME, at EVMWD.net. We will answer those questions at the end as time permits, and we will also post answers to the questions that we receive at evmwd.com/budget. I would like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Robert Hartwig, Assistant General Manager of Business Services for EVMWD. Robert Hartwig joined EVMWD in 2015 and serves as our Assistant General Manager of Business Services, assisting with carrying out the board directives and assuring compliance with EVMWD policies in areas of finance, customer service, and information technology. Mr. Hartwig has overseen several budget processes here at the district in his tenure and will share his insight tonight on how EVMWD continues to ensure safe, clean, reliable water for our customers each day. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Hartwig. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. First of all, before we begin, you'll remember that Bonnie said that the meeting was not agendized, and that actually has a meaning. What it means is that we do have a couple of board members here in attendance listening in this evening. I know that Director Morris and Director Burke were here earlier. What it also means is that because of California's laws, they won't be making any comments at tonight's meeting. Instead, they're here to listen to the presentation. So today's topics. Today is the first of several budget presentations and discussions for the next 2-year budget cycle. What we're doing is we're putting into 30 minutes what it has taken several hours for the board to review. We've added this kickoff workshop to the schedule, and that provides you with an overview of the district and our budgeting process. We're also going to try to answer any customer questions during the process. We'll be getting into more detail in future workshops. Tonight's presentation is important to set the stage for those future meetings. Tonight we'll be covering several topics. The budget process, we'll be doing an overview. We'll be giving you an overview of the district. We'll be talking about some budget challenges that we have in store for us in this year's budget. And then we'll talk about the first 2 parts of the budget. And we talk about building the budget. And the first 2 parts that we do in that process of building the budget is we review salaries and benefits and purchased water. Next slide, please. And this is an overview of the budget process. It gives in a kind of a visual form what I'll talk to you about a little bit. From October through December, all of our staff were working to develop the district's operations budget, our maintenance budget, our capital budgets. Those budget requests were finalized by our managers and department heads. They gave those budgets to the finance department, and the finance department started their review. And at the same time, finance was coordinating with an outside consultant to begin performing a rate study for the district. Then December through January, again, finance is reviewing the budget requests. They worked with the departments to revise those requests. Usually what revised request means is that the requests go down from the original requests. Finance provides the preliminary budget information to our consultant, along with water production and other data, and the consultant uses all of that information together and continues to build that rate model that we talked about in the first October through December frame. And then the general manager begins to review the preliminary budget, and he also requests further information for the departments, and he makes some additional revisions to the budget. Then from January through March, finance, together with our managers and our general manager, develop presentations that we then review and discuss with the board. We propose the budget. Once we have a proposed budget, that's presented to the board over a series of budget sessions, and those budget sessions are all open to the public. The board reviews the proposed budgets that came in, and they may make further revisions to the budget as well. And then the budget is also at this time being presented to the public in a series of workshops, and we're providing you with an opportunity to ask questions during those workshops. In addition, recordings of these meetings will be available on the district's website for those people who weren't able to make it. Then in the March-April timeframe, our consulting firm is going to be presenting its completed rate study to the board. The board is going to review the rate study. They may make even additional recommendations as a result of that review. Then once the budget is finalized, staff would produce a Proposition 218 notice, which is mailed out in coordination with the board and the general manager. We want you to understand that, especially in regards to the Proposition 218 notice, the timing for that notice may change based on board discussions. And then finally, in June, management formally presents the budget at the June 10th board meeting. Again, completely open to the public. Assuming that the budget is passed by the board, that budget would take effect on July 1st. When appropriate, the board holds a rate hearing to discuss any proposed changes in the rates. And after hearing that testimony, the board takes action on the proposed rates. And if the rates change, then the new rates would take effect shortly after adoption of those new rates. All right, so let's go to the next slide. And this provides you with the current budget presentation schedule. Times and dates are subject to change, but these have been followed closely so far. We've discussed the purchased water and the salaries and benefits, which is what we're discussing tonight on February 4th. Today at the study session, we discussed the capital outlay, capital improvement project, and debt service budgets. Those were done this morning at 9 a.m. We'll be talking about those with you at a later date. Then we have our department operating budgets. That's coming up at the next study session on March 8th. Those three portions comprise the expenditure portion of the budget. Then on March 17th, we'll be doing a rate presentation to the board. We need all of that expense information to put into the rate model so that we can come up with a rate presentation. And then we have a final budget recap from the board on April 7th, or with the board on April 7th, excuse me. And then if they need to do a Proposition 218 notice, the earliest that would be mailed out would be April 23rd. And then the budget hearing will definitely be on June 10th. And there may be a rate hearing. Actually, it's not a budget hearing. It's just a meeting to pass the budget. And there will be a rate hearing either on June 10th or at a later date. And then at the bottom of that slide, you can see when all of the community presentations are scheduled. Again, all sessions are open to the public. In addition, there are going to be some communities, there are going to be some additional presentations to the cities in our service area, to major POAs, major HOAs, and to other community organizations. And next slide, please. The Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District, EVMWD, was created in 1950. At first, the district was able to supply water strictly from local sources, but As you know, the district grew over time and more water, other sources of water were needed. We contracted with the Western Municipal Water District. They are able to provide Elsinore Valley with what we call imported water. And that imported water comes from the Metropolitan Water District, which we sometimes refer to as MET water. That new water, that MET water, comes from northern Colorado and from the Colorado River. It comes through a massive system of pipes, canals, pumping facilities, treatment facilities, etc., before it finally reaches us, and it travels, in some cases, hundreds of miles from its source. Over the years, the district continued to grow, and as you can see, we've had several acquisitions since those early days. Some major ones include the Lake Elsinore Water and Sewer System back in 84 through 86. In 1989, we acquired the Temescal Water Company. And in 2011, the Elsinore Water District. And 2017, our most recent, was most of what is known as the County Water Company. It is now part of EVMWD. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the water facilities within the district. You can see on this map that we cover an area of almost 100 square miles. We serve as far south as Murrieta and as far north as Corona. We serve the cities of Lake Elsinore, Canyon Lake, Wildemar, part of Murrieta, and then some other subdivisions such as the Horse Thief subdivision. We also serve some rural areas outside of Paris, and we serve areas in the mountains just west of Lake Elsinore. Some of our customers are over 3,000 feet in elevation and are right on the Orange County line. And finally, we serve an area known as the Temescal Water Division, and that's just outside of what you see as the northwest boundary on that map. You'll see several little dots that are northwest of the boundaries, and that's up in the area where the Temescal Water Division serves. We have 2 water treatment plants. We have 3 lakes. We have 2 dams. We have 68 above ground storage facilities. There are 57 booster stations throughout the district, 14 active production wells, and over 45,000 water meters, almost 46,000 now. Additionally, we have 748 miles of underground water pipelines. Those are things that you don't see because they're under the ground, but there's 748 miles of those. And then all of that extensive infrastructure is in addition to what we talked about, the MET infrastructure on the previous page. And that's what we need to maintain so that we need to maintain all of those facilities so that we can provide customers with safe, reliable drinking water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year round. And this is a picture of that water system. You can see 157,000 total customers, 46,000 accounts. You'll see a couple of things on there that we'll talk about on other slides. That includes the recycled water accounts and the sewer service accounts. And we'll be getting into those on future slides. Some recent highlights. Since 2010, we've added over 6,000 water connections. That's more than 15% growth in the district. We've tried to innovate over that time. We've tried to serve that growth while maintaining the same level of employees over that time, and we've been able to do that. In order to serve those 46,000 water meters, we have to provide 22,600 total acre feet of water each year. Some of that's imported, and we'll be talking about the imported water later tonight. And then some of that is locally developed water from our wells and things like that. To give you some idea about this large amount of water, 1 acre foot of water is enough to serve 2 of those water meters each year. And 1 acre foot is equal to 325,000 gallons of water, and that's over 7.3 billion gallons of water that we provide to customers each year. And as you can see, supplying all of that water is a big operation, and it requires a lot of personnel and equipment in order to do it. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of the wastewater system. This map shows you our 3 wastewater treatment plants. We have 37 lift stations. In addition to those facilities, there are 415 miles of underground wastewater pipes. Our treatment plants are able to treat 9.7 million gallons of wastewater each day, and we serve almost 37,000 customer accounts. The remaining accounts, the reason there are more water accounts than wastewater accounts is that the rest of those people are on septic systems throughout the district. At the southern end of our district, some of our customers are served by the Santa Rosa wastewater plant, which is not shown on this slide. That's a plant that's operated jointly by Rancho California, Elsinore Valley, and the Western Municipal Water Districts. Next slide, please. This is a graphic overview of that wastewater system. Again, 157,000 customers, 3 wastewater plants. We'll get into the recycled water on a future page. You'll see on this page that 5.5 million gallons of water is used to from what we treat is then sent to Lake Elsinore to help maintain the lake levels at Lake Elsinore. You can also see here that we on the average treat 7.2 million gallons of water each day, and that's less than the 9.7 that I told you about on the previous page. What that is, the difference for that you see there is the remaining amount is capacity we need when there are storm events in the district, and we are actually pushing the limits on what we're able to treat during storm events. And as a result, we're going to have to expand our wastewater treatment facility. That's required by state and federal regulations. And this is going to be important to remember when we discuss the district's capital spending needs at the next session that we have together. Please also note that our wastewater is treated to the highest standards. All of our treated effluent is recycled in one way or another. It helps maintain the level at Lake Elsinore. Some of it maintains the ecology of the Elsinore Valley, and then some of it goes into the recycled water system, what we call non-potable or non-potable irrigation, and there are 150 of those recycled accounts. Also, some of the users of that irrigation water include the golf course and landscaped areas such as in HOA common areas. And those recycled water accounts have grown by 50% since 2010. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned before, the district is a very large operation. All of this information that was just provided works together to affect our budget. It's very important to realize that the district currently has almost $1 billion in buildings and equipment. And as you probably know, water and especially wastewater are both very effective at corroding and wearing out that equipment over time. Ultimately, all of this $1 billion in assets needs to be replaced over time. Now, we try to cash finance a lot of that work, but this is often not very practical when it comes to large projects. And as a result, some of these replacements are financed through long-term borrowing. It doesn't seem to make sense when you think of building equipment today that will benefit people in the future, and we try to match the benefit with the cost, and that's why we tend to debt fund some of those larger projects so that the users of tomorrow will pay for that benefit of building that project in the future. Think of that $160 million in long-term borrowing and those $1 billion of assets. I want to put it to you in another way. Think of it as a $300,000 home. That's the $1 billion. And what it represents is about a $48,000 mortgage on that $300,000 home. As you can see, we have a lot of equity in our home, our $1 billion home. And we don't owe a very large portion on that home. The fact that we borrow only for our largest projects also helps keep the district strong financially. The district is in excellent financial condition based on board policies, and that's combined with some forward-thinking management practices. Our bond ratings are very close to the highest possible ratings we can receive, and those high ratings help to lower our interest payments and other costs associated with issuing long-term debt, and that ultimately saves our ratepayers money. We supplement those savings by aggressively pursuing grants from the state and the federal government. You can see there we've received $13 million in grants since 2017. That represents $13 million that didn't have to be paid by ratepayers. It was funded by other sources. Over the years, we've also been able to secure some low-interest loans from the state of California. Interest rates on those loans are even lower than you would receive if it was a traditional bond issue. Right now, it's looking to be in the neighborhood of 0.9%. We've had some in the 1.3% range, and we've had some where they do loan forgiveness and we pay no interest on those loans. And ultimately, all of those different things together have caused us to be able to save $86 million in debt payments for our customers over time. I also wanted to illustrate the budget on the pie charts to the right of the page. With $1 billion in buildings and equipment, 100 square miles of service area, $80 million in annual operating costs, and about $100 million in capital improvement costs. The district is large, it's complex. In spite of this, if you've ever interacted with our staff, I hope that you've experienced some great customer service. We believe that we provide great customer service, and we need to hear from those who are not receiving great customer service because we're always looking to improve. Considering the economic impacts of those water and wastewater services, this is something that we should not lose in tonight's conversation. Okay, moving on to some of our budget challenges, and there are 4 major budget challenges in this year's budget. One is imported water costs. We'll be talking about that in a couple of slides here. Another is electricity. Another are employment obligations. Those are contractual obligations with our employees. They have bargaining units that we have to bargain with. And then there's the cost of compliance. And just to give you some highlights here, imported water costs will be rising by $4 million next year. Electric costs will be rising by $1 to $1.3 million next year. The employment obligations, salaries, benefits, health insurance, pensions, all of that, that's another $2 million in extra costs for next year. And annually, we have to deal with costs of compliance. And conservatively, those costs of compliance run about $5.5 million on our annual budget. Next slide, please. So what does it take to build the budget? We start, as I said, with water purchases, salaries, CIP, outlay, debt service, and department O&M. All of those go together. O&M is operations and maintenance, by the way. Sorry about that. I sometimes use acronyms when I shouldn't. All of those 4 go together to build the rate model. And then from that rate model come the proposed rates. And those rates have to be compliant with Proposition 218, which means that we cannot charge more in rates than it costs the district to operate. This year's budget cycle is a 2-year cycle. But the rate schedule is a 4-year rate schedule, and I thought that would be important to note tonight as well. Go on to the next slide, please. And to the slide after that. Talk briefly about salaries and benefits. To the slide, next slide, please. This graph just basically shows you where our staffing levels have been since 2009. As you can see, it was 174, and I believe it's 172 now. So we've been able to keep employees fairly constant over time. You can see some dips and rises. This would look almost flat if 0 was the the bottom number on this graph instead of 120. And then the line, so those are the bars. That's the employment on the bars. The line is the number of customers we've had. And you can see that's climbed from about 38,000 or so to now 46,000 customers over the last 12 years. Quite a bit of growth in our area. And we've tried to do that efficiently without increasing staff whenever possible. Next slide, please. Again, a reminder, we do have two labor bargaining units. They negotiate a contract with the district that's approved by the board. That contract does call for certain adjustments in pay, and that has a cost on the budget. In addition to that, by the way, the rate increase for the past year, I believe, was just around 2%. In addition, we have health insurance. The costs there are projected to go up by 10%. We do attempt to negotiate with medical providers, medical insurance providers. We have switched providers in order to save money in the past, and we sometimes adjust what's covered in the insurance in order to keep rates as low as possible. Our pension costs are set by the state of California. There's through the public employee retirement system. Those are contractual. We have to pay what the required rates are that they give us each year. And then now we'll move on to the last part of tonight's presentation, which is purchased water. Purchased water. You can see we have several water sources here. This is the number of acre feet of water that's going to be produced in the next couple of years of the budget. You can see in the red boxed area, that's the purchased water portion, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. The wells, the back basin, cold water, surface water, those will all be discussed when we talk about the operations and maintenance portion of the budget in a couple of meetings. But on the purchased water side, in order to meet the demands of the citizens, we need to produce 16,830 acre feet of purchased water. Those purchased water costs, if we'll go to the next page, you can see have increased steadily, and over the next couple of years, the Metropolitan Water District, will be increasing the rates by $92 per acre feet, or almost 9% over the course of 2 years. And that's money we have to pay. If we're going to sell the water, we have to buy the water, some of the water, in order to sell it to the customers. And so that cost is a cost that is driven by the demand on the system. In addition, we have some fixed charges. The readiness to serve charge you see there is a fixed charge that recovers the costs of providing emergency service and available capacity. The capacity charge is there to recover the costs of providing peaking capacity. So they look for what the highest amount of water is that we ever take from them in a day, and then charge us peaking charge, basically. So that's what that amounts to. The other charges are primarily an assessment from the Meeks and Daly district, and then also from the San Jacinto River. From the Mills gravity line. Those are maintenance charges every year of about $150,000. The Meeks and Daly assessments are about $390,000, and that's how you get that last number in the lower right corner of that page. And those don't include another $35 to $40 per acre foot of service charges that come from Eastern Water District and Western Water District for conveying the water to us. Okay, and then the final slide here. Our final slide tonight is just basically a recap of, we do this for the board every meeting. We talk about the total budget. Those are the two columns on the left, and that's our historical data. And then the next number, our fiscal year 2022 proposed budget. So far, we've covered salaries and benefits and purchased water. And as we cover the other areas on this slide, they'll be filled in at our future meetings so that you can see kind of where we're at and what we've talked about so far. So tonight we've talked about, ultimately, if you go to the fiscal year 2023 column, we've talked about $52 million of the budget. And you can see that that is an increase. If you look, salaries and benefits higher, and then purchased water much higher than it was 2 years ago. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Do we have any questions, Bonnie?
At this time, we do not have any questions that were asked by the public. I would like to offer the opportunity for anyone who does have a question. You can click the chat button on the right-hand side, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Before we move on, one quick question for you, Bob. You mentioned back in the imported water that we are utilizing more water since we're not using the Canyon Lake area water. Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, let's go back to that slide. It's the water supplies in acre feet slide. It's about 4 slides back. There, that's the one. I wasn't sure if I'd have time to go into this in a lot of detail. So I was stuck with just the purchased water, but let's look at this slide in a little more detail since we've got the time. You can see the well production there. It's we had projected 5,500 in well production for fiscal year 2021. We're projecting a little bit less than that in 22 and 23. You can see that that's down to 4,600 acre feet. This is, we have to do well maintenance on our wells to make sure that they're operating properly. And then we also have to make sure that they're compliant with an emerging constituent. That's something in the water. That's what that means, emerging constituent. And that something in the water is known as PFAS or PFAS. And you may have heard about it, but we have to make sure that our wells comply with that as well. You can see our back basin treatment plant. That production's staying fairly steady with what we had budgeted in fiscal year 2021. If you go back and look at fiscal year 2020, you can see it was only 425 acre feet. That's because the plant was actually offline for a large portion of the year while we did some rehabilitation work on it. Cold water, that's the basin up by that Temescal area that I talked about earlier. It's just outside of our boundaries. And you can see that the production there is projected at about 585 acre feet. We did have a well that went offline up there. It just failed. We're going to have to dig a new well up there, and that's digging a new well is not cheap. That's a multi-million-dollar project. Cost about $3 million to dig a well. And then lastly, the surface water. You'll notice that went from a budget of 2,500, and you can see a lot of zeros on there. And that's because that surface water is Canyon Lake Water Treatment Plant. And the reason it's at 0 is because that PFAS, emerging constituent, that thing in the water that I talked about earlier, we found that in Canyon Lake Water Treatment Plant. And until we can put some facilities in place that can treat that PFAS, we cannot produce water out of that plant. So it's down for a couple of years while we design and build a system that can treat that surface water and get rid of that PFAS that's in the water. But what that means is you have to purchase more of our imported water. You can see that our budget for 2021 was 15,300 acre feet, but we're projecting that we're going to need 16,470 in 2021. We're holding that steady for 2022, and we believe we'll need a little bit more in 2023 due to growth in the district. And so that's why that number is up, and that's why the cost of purchased water is up so much.
Great, thank you, Bob. All right, at this time, I do not see any other questions. So we will go ahead and close this meeting. Information will be available on our website at evmwd.com/budget. I want to thank Mr. Hartwig and our board for joining us again this evening. And we would love to see you here again for our next live meeting, which will be on March 18th at 6 p.m. You're always welcome to join us at our study session. And those are usually Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m., but the schedule for the budget is available on our website at evmwd.com/budget. So we are happy to assist. Feel free to email me anytime with your questions. And thanks again, Bob, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.